Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. I thank Allah for all His blessings that He's given to us. Those that I won't even attempt to try to count and show appreciation because there's so many. But you too could bear witness that there's so much good that Allah has put in creation that we can't help but to say, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. So brothers and sisters in our listening audience, I greet you with the greetings of peace and paradise. Once again, Assalamu alaikum. And today, for the Jummah services, the gathering where people of faith, and especially those who call themselves Muslim, gather to pay honor and respect to the principles of Al-Islam. As it says in the Quran, when the call is given to us, we have to take heed and to leave all traffic and trade and to come and participate in what is called the Jummah services. And as we had stated last week in the Jummah service, our subject was from chapter 5 in the Quran, Al-Ma'idah, translated meaning, one of the translations is the table spread. And usually, for us English speaking, when we think of table and spread, usually our appetites come into being. Because on a table you have food, just like in earlier scriptures where they mention of the Last Supper. Automatically, we've been conditioned in this country and community and our conscience to think of some type of meal or something that helps feed our bodies. And then as we learn, as we study in our religion and the religions of faith, that there's more to eating food than just physical food. And it's with that vernacular of thought, with that idea of thought, that briefly I would like to explain some of the things that helps us to be a better person, a better community, and to better serve each other. And I'll start off with a verse in the Quran from that same chapter we had last week, Al-Ma'idah, or the table spread, to kind of give us more insight, hopefully, inshallah, to help us to be conscious of our own behavior. And in so doing, it'll help us to understand some of the dynamics in human behavior that can build friendship or grow enemies. So one of the things, and I want you to pay close attention, and I'll reference the actual verses in the Quran so that you can go back and read and study it for yourself. Because my understanding of it is a certain way and on a certain level of reason. And when you read and study, Allah can open up your heart and mind to even a greater understanding. So we ask Allah to guide our words and what we say, and not just to come before you to try to impress you, because unless it is in the importance of serving Allah, that's most important. In the Quran, because it speaks of those that came before us. And simply put, we all had parents, whether we knew them or did not know. And in order for us to be birthed forth in this life, it had to come through the canals of our parents. It's because they came before us. And the Quran teaches a great lesson on why we should go to those before us and see what we can learn from them. So I'll be reading from chapter 5. I'll start off with chapter 13. And it was speaking to a people who was given guidance and who probably made promises they'll do a certain thing. So the Quran says this. It says, but because of their breach of their covenant, meaning there was some type of agreement made between them and the promise to be obedient to their Lord. It says, because of their breach, meaning that something went wrong, that they didn't fulfill their promise or commitment, we cursed them and made their hearts grow hard. They changed the words from their right places and forgot a good part of the message that was sent to them. So nor will you cease to find them, barring a few, ever bent on deceits, but forgive them and overlook their misdeeds. For Allah loveth those who are kind. So at first, it tells of those that may have broke their promise. And to our mind, sometimes we rush to say, okay, they did that, then we should do that. Sort of like retaliatory. But as we read in the Quran, Allah says, forgive them and overlook their misdeeds. For Allah loveth those who are kind. For Muslims all over the world who read and study the Quran, in the Quran itself, it shows you where Allah has a far greater capacity for mercy than we could even dream of. Because it says in the Quran, it is Ar-Rahman that teaches the Quran. See, we may read it and quote it, but when Ar-Rahman teaches, it'll show us that it takes something far greater than us to actually give humanity the essence of how life is to progress beyond our limited understanding. So we said, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, which means we thank Allah because He's the Lord of all the world. The worlds of reasoning and each of our individual hearts and minds. We only have the capacity to think from a very limited level of the minds that we have been influenced by. And the next verse, and I conclude with that verse in this particular point, it says, for Allah loveth those who are kind. So it says, from those who call themselves Christian, we did take a covenant But they forgot a good part of the message that was sent to them. So we stirred up enmity and hatred between them, the one against the other, until the day of judgment. And soon will Allah show them what it is they have done. And you may wonder, well, if it's speaking of Christians, why are we concerned? Because in the Quran and throughout it said, go to those before you. Because for the believers, it said those who believe in this revelation, in the revelation sent before that time, is to give us an eye-opener that we study with Allah's help to understand. We try to get the lesson that Allah wants us to see, how we can better improve ourselves. And there's another place in the Quran where we can apply it. He created these differences not to despise each other, but to get to know each other. And it's important, as Imam teaches, ulama, sheikh, for us to see that it is not us remaking the world. It's Allah that changes what's in the heart of the people who striving to improve, that He enlarges that provision so that the connection of helping each other would be an easier transition to work with each other. And in so doing, Allah can show us lesson in everything in our environment. So it don't leave out religion. In fact, it's very inclusive of the religion, because in the religion you find people of faith, of things that are far greater. And collectively, we all share the point that there's one creator, one God who created all of this. And then as we study, we can see the unity of working with each other. And so, brothers and sisters, I wanted to put emphasis on that point, because we are living in a time when those who even profess to be Muslim, following the deen, as they say, the religion of truth, the religion to establish peace. And if that's so for us, then we won't be committing atrocities against innocent people in hiding behind our label as Muslims in the religion al-Islam, just like during the great wars of the Christian or the Crusade. In all the religion, in India, you can't name a country on this earth that they didn't have turmoil within their own religious establishment. So it's a lesson for all of us to learn that they don't necessarily have to be that religion. It falls back on that person who breaks, as the Quran says in the table spread. They break their covenant, not so much with each other, but in the guidance that Allah gives to each follower of faith in their own religion. And I heard Imam Muhammad was saying, we're not here to convert you. Won't you, if you're a Christian, be a better Christian? So for us, the Muslim, to be a better Muslim, to be more obedient to what we profess we believe in. And so that'll bring me to this other subject that we hear us recite to each other by saying we must taqwa Allah. And taqwa Allah, some say reverence and some say really fear Allah. So, we have to fear Allah. And the fear that we're talking about is not just the fear of ordinary things that's in our nature, Like at one time I gave an example. If a lion came to this door and we were trying to hold service, that type of fear would clear the room. And as long as we out of the grasp of that lion, then that type of fear would subside. But when we talk about the fear of Allah, it's a greater fear that we know we cannot escape the presence of Allah. And that fear is a type of reverence that'll help keep us strong in the faith of what we profess to believe in. So that in the absence of other Muslims, our family, if we have a chore and we're out there with the trust that we believe in Allah, then we will try to honor that trust or covenant and not violate it. Because even though we may not see Allah physically with our eyes, we know that He sees us. So it's the type of taqwa that gives us a greater understanding of how to reverence Allah. And just to share a little more about that, we had a leader and teacher in Imam Muhammad, may Allah's mercy and peace be upon him, who studied the Quran and studied and tried to help us to learn how to properly love and appreciate Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by studying the Sunnah, the ways of the Prophet, and Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet, so that we will get a better understanding of his character. Because in the Quran, he says we'll find in him an excellent example. And when we have an excellent example, it's sort of like a roadmap of how to shape our behavior. So Imam Muhammad wrote a book to help us to focus when we would get lost. And the title of this book, and I share this with you, so that you could go back if you have accessibility to this book. It's called Prayer and Al-Islam, where he says in this book, and my reference point will come from page 24 in that, addressing the believer. So in concluding the first part, I just want to just put reference on the concept of taqwa so we can properly understand its significance and the power of change that this word has. It says the human heart knows many different fears, but all of them should be dominated. All those fears. You know, sometimes we get afraid of the dark or a strange place. But he reminded the believers, he said, but all of those fears should be dominated by the fear of Allah, which He created within us. Our fears of physical danger, of the unknown, and of everything else should be dominated by Allah. Fear which comes from a devotion of our duty to Allah and from our desire to never displease Allah. And in that fear is teaching the root cause and that nature of what type of taqwa. It's a type of fear that can render an inner peace, not the anxiety of escape, but a welcoming when we humble ourselves and say, oh, Allah, help us. So it's that which is called taqwa in Al-Islam, which is an Arabic word, which means to be God conscious, And among the essential elements of taqwa are firmness and enthusiastic patience in following the will of Allah. So taqwa comes from a motivation to obey Allah. And Allah is its constant object. It signifies the fact that nothing should ever become so strong in our consciousness that it blocks our recognition of Allah's power over us. And then so keeping that concept, and especially if you have a book and prayer in Al-Islam to read it, so that our taqwa will be more balanced to understand the type of fear that we should have for Allah. So it signifies that it should always turn back to Allah. So taqwa is the best fear because it is a conscious fear. A believer strives to make his life conform to what Allah has revealed because he is conscious of what Allah wants him to do and of what he wants him to avoid. So even in the absence of others who claim to believe like you believe, how will we measure when it comes to making the choice of doing right or choosing the wrong? So taqwa also describes a form of love for Allah, which prompts believers to exercise self-restraint and to avoid involvement in any form of sin, wrongdoing, or injustice. A believer refrains from seeking his livelihood through unlawful or dishonest means because of his desire to please Allah. And by the same token, a believer will not seek his living by any means which will endanger the health or well-being of others, whoever they may be. A believer is constantly aware of the presence of the omnipotent, the all-powerful God. He feels shame if he does anything which Allah disapproves, because his love for Allah is the strongest force in his life. So taqwa, in essence, is an attitude which indicates our awakened humanity and our submission to the will of Allah, as well as a recognition of the fact that we are ultimately accountable to Allah. And when we stop and ask Allah to bless us to digest the wisdom that is presented to us, so that we seek Allah first and last. I heard Imam Muhammad say that, and I mentioned that to you when he took off. When they asked him, "What do you want? And why do you feel that what qualifies you to be the leader?" and things like that. Well, he said, "My purpose is to seek Allah first and last." And to those of us who got to know him, we know that he tried to live that the best way he could and teach us. And I'm quoting from some of the lessons that he taught us that we could go back and refer to Because even if in our tendency to forget, or in our arrogance to think that we already know, therein lies a sin. Because when we talk for Allah, we have to humble ourselves and just thank Allah for whatever good we think we have, and to share in a humble fashion, and not make mockery of those, as the Quran says, to forgive them. And it says, and turn to Allah. It says, and overlook their misdeeds. For Allah loveth those who are kind. And just as a reminder to the wise one among us, it says in the Quran for all of us, if justice that we hear so often proclaimed in the streets of America and throughout the world today. But here's Allah teaching. If justice was done, wouldn't be a soul left on the face of the earth. So as to draw our conscience, and Allah knows how to draw our conscience to our own behavior. So I'm going to conclude by that, because that's enough for digestion right now, and to seek the reason and the pattern of the thought, and see where it leads to, and see what it constructs in an individual who submits their entire self to obey Allah, so that we could grow up balanced and not think that we know it, or we so righteous that others are not. And when the Quran teaches us to embrace them, forgive them, because in the end, our return of every one of us is back to Allah, who is the ultimate judge. So brothers and sisters, with that, I greet you as I came before you with the greeting of peace. As-salamu alaykum. Once again, I greet you, Assalamu alaikum. And if you're just joining us, it's a greeting of peace. And oftentimes, I say it's also a prayer. It's one of the meanings that I can gain from that when you extend the greetings of peace. Because someone may be having a hard time or struggling internally with something. And if you give them the greetings of peace and paradise, you hoping and praying that Allah give that person inner peace, whether it's your spouse, your children, your friend, or things like that. So you start off with an attitude of asking Allah to grant that individual peace. And in this day and time, not only of COVID-19, we all need peace. We need peace of mind and peace of understanding, so we would know what is best to do. And I tell you, and we know we have to, in peace, establish a type of patience, because it's important for us to get back together and share this truth. But in efforts to get back together, as we observe spatial distance and mask wearing to kind of cut down on the contagious virus that takes life, it's sort of like a test so that we too have to obey these principles that we find out and find ourselves in the greater society. So in concluding with this, I want to share with you another verse in the Quran where And it comes from that same surah, the table spread of chapter 5. It says, "O you who believe, stand out firmly as witnesses to fair dealings, and let not hatred of others to you make you swerve to the wrong and depart from justice. Be just." That is what is next to piety. And in so being just and being more pious, that is the true taqwa of Allah, or the fear of Allah. For it is Allah is well acquainted with all that you do. And to leave you with that, that's also taken from the 5th chapter, the 8th verse. And so that you could go back and study it for yourself. Because the most important is not just to try to impress you with rhetorical expressions that we may see and read from the Quran, but to show you what helps us and that can better help you. And together, in reverence to Allah, we will learn to do the things that He asked of us to do. Like treat each other right, to give in charity. And don't wait to be discovered of your greatness. Just come and offer it freely, and Allah will bless you. So brothers and sisters, I came before you, I ended with giving you a greeting. As-salamu alaykum.